I'm Lainey Lamore, and there are a lot of recent developments that have caused me, the Know Your Numbers person, to uninstall Google Analytics from my website and all of its assets. I know, right? And in today's episode, I'm going to share with you why you may want to follow my lead on this one. This is Oh My Growth, the podcast for online business owners who want to better plan and forecast their results, but definitely don't want to have to become an analyst to do it, which is cool because I'm like your remote integrator over here, and I handle all that stuff so that you can make all the very boss decisions about what you're going to do to create your next best month, launch, or collaboration. We're talking about Oh My Growth moments, boss, and that's what this whole podcast is dedicated to delivering to you. So let's do this. As a certified card-carrying member of the International Association of Privacy Professionals, I get regular emails updating me on the status of international data privacy. Now, in January, I received one of those emails, and this one made my heart sink. The title was,
Austrian Data Protection Authority says Google Analytics violates GDPR.
Which is a headline that basically says, tracking website visitors from Austria using Google Analytics, that's illegal. Now, shortly after that, another court case determined the same outcome for France and then Liechtenstein, and now the domino effect continues. The TLDR of what this means for you and I, and why it made my heart sink, is that if you have European residents coming to your website and you are using Google Analytics to track their behavior, you are either breaching European Union laws or you're about to, depending on those court cases that are just coming in like conga lines, and you're collecting information about your visitors illegally. So naturally, I spiraled about what does this mean for me? Because I've certainly been promoting the use of Google Analytics. I've been supporting the use of its products, and I've been monetizing my expertise with Google Analytics to provide you with better ways to use those products. Despite the fact that I built a lot of my online business around my background with Google Analytics, I felt like I had to put my sunk costs aside on this one and get honest about how and why Google Analytics was problematic for small business owners like you and me. And I dove deep, and listen, I actually came out feeling like this was one of the easiest decisions I've made, the decision to pull the plug on Google Analytics. And I installed it from tracking all of my assets last February. I also pulled all my related products from my shop, and moving forward, I will no longer be recommending Google Analytics as my platform of choice. So let's talk about what makes Google Analytics so problematic. And according to W3 Techs, Google Analytics is used by over 50% of all websites online, and it accounts for over 85% of all websites that use tracking. And so it's a good idea at this point to clarify what we've all gotten ourselves into. Reason number one, Google Analytics is problematic. You are being made accountable for too many legal implications that you likely do not understand. Unless you're a data analyst who knows their privacy, or you're a privacy specialist who knows their data, or unless you hire someone who fits that bill to audit your use of Google Analytics as regularly as their terms and conditions of use change, it is unreasonable to expect that you would be able to use the tool in a legally compliant manner. It's just not set up that way. For example, the onus to limit what is called personally identifiable information, also called PII, is on you, the person who installed Google Analytics. Meanwhile, most business owners slap the tracking code on their website, not even knowing what PII is or how they may be collecting it, which they often are. And I can confirm this because as someone who used to offer its services, I've been on the back end of a lot of Google Analytics accounts, and more often than not, I would see the client would be collecting data points like credit card numbers or email addresses that are being recorded in their analytics reports. These are data points that the terms and conditions tell you you need to block, but unless you're an expert, it's unlikely that you'll know how to do this, or even if it's being done at all. And this example is just the tip of the iceberg of the things that you are agreeing to and you're supposed to be accounting for when you check off those terms and conditions. You're also supposed to provide a privacy policy that details what information you're collecting and how that information is being used. Meanwhile, most small business owners don't even understand most of the information they are collecting on behalf of Google or how Google is using this information. Because let's be clear, Google owns that information you collected on its behalf. You're just kind of acting as a data broker for Google when you're using its analytics software. And while you're both using the software, you are the one who is accountable for getting the consent of your website visitors and for explaining how that information is being used in your privacy policy. And while all those obligations are laid out in their terms and conditions, I doubt most people using Google Analytics are racing to read through those every single time they're updated, assuming they were read at all in the first place. But there are also concerns about data storage because Google stores its data on American servers. And there are European privacy regulations like GDPR that state you're breaking the law by storing your EU resident data on Google's American servers, therefore making your use of Google Analytics illegal when European visitors come to visit your website. The point is that Google Analytics is not an out-of-the-box software you can just plug in and not have to think about. There are implications related to where you are, where your audience is coming from, how you're operating, what they change in the terms and conditions, among so many other factors that too few online business owners are clear about. And I think that's a big problem, especially with how we're seeing so many more court cases coming up now, and we are going to see more. This is just the beginning. My number 2 reason for why I feel Google Analytics is problematic is if you want to be found on Google, using Google Analytics can hurt you. Now, I know it sounds confusing, but stay with me on this one. Search engine optimization, or what the cool kids call SEO, is the process of being found through search engines like Google. A lot of aspects of your website are being measured to determine whether you're showing up on page 1 of a Google search or if you're relegated to page 20. Now, while keywords can be worked on to improve how searchable your content is, search engines also measure other factors like page load time to determine whether they will be recommending your site over your competitors. When you embed tracking codes on your website, it most likely will slow down your load time, and in turn, that can impact your search rank. Now, the script that Google Analytics requires you to embed is far from lightweight, especially if you're using its suite of products that include Google Tag Manager. And the analytics script will typically impact your load time far more than most other analytics software. That's understandable because each website visitor can count on having 500 data points collected about them when they click through to a site using Google Analytics tracking. And there's a whole lot of that information that Google has to secure about your visitor even before your page starts loading. And in turn, this will almost certainly impact your page load times and your search rank. Reason number 3 Google Analytics is problematic is it isn't even close to being your most reliable source of information anymore. Fun fact, but any tracking done by Google Analytics gets the same treatment as if it were an ad, which isn't exactly a stretch, seeing as Google is primarily an advertising company at this point, or at least it seems that way. But what happens is that anyone using ad blockers will typically also be blocking your Google Analytics data collection from firing. This means that no matter how intentional you are about putting the right tracking in place for your campaigns, you may be missing out on a huge chunk of your story if that information isn't being communicated because your visitors aren't even being accounted for. Reason number 5 Google Analytics is problematic is, look, it's too much for most small business owners. This may sound all too familiar to your experience, but when you log into Google Analytics and it's like,
what am I even looking at?
And then once you do have a clue as to what you are looking at, you start clicking about because it's all very interesting. But the average business owner seldom logs into Google Analytics and leaves feeling like the time they spent on the platform helped them get data-driven or make numbers-based decisions. More often than not, it turns into something you'll need to figure out later, which, completely defeats the purpose of collecting data to begin with. If you aren't even looking at your numbers, which is often the case with people who have Google Analytics installed on their website because the learning curve is too steep or the whole experience feels intimidating, there just isn't much of a point to collecting them. Especially because, brace yourself on this one, because this one feels the most hurtful. But you're not the only one, or even the main one, who is using this information. Reason number 5 Google Analytics is problematic is you are exploiting your audience in exchange for the use of free software. So you send people to your website to build a relationship of trust with people you're trying to serve. Nice job. But when you're using Google Analytics on your website, you're actually exploiting those same people you say you're trying to build trust with so that you can use free analytics software. I mentioned that Google Analytics collects, stores, and uses over 500 data points, and if you're thinking,
well, that's way more information than I'd ever need or even think to look at.
Well, you're correct. But where you're not correct is you're assuming that you are who this information is being collected for. You're not. When you're collecting this information, you're acting something like an information broker working on behalf of Google, who, according to CNBC, monetized that information we all collected on its behalf to the tune of $183 billion in 2020. This means that you chose to sell out your website visitors' information, and it's usually more than you or your visitors are even aware of or would have been willing to agree to if the extent of which had been made a little bit clearer. And you inadvertently and unintentionally sold your fans and followers out in exchange for free software that you could have been paying less than $10 a month to be using privacy-compliant analytics software instead. So if that feels like it was a lot for you to wrap your head around, I was just, ooh. And as I really processed the gravity of the situation, I felt some type of way because I've promoted and endorsed the analytics software as a great tool to help you help the people you're serving. So I will no longer be promoting the use of Google Analytics, but don't think that means I'm done with dashboards and knowing your numbers and identifying trends, because there are privacy compliant options that are not only legal to use, huzzah, but incredibly low price and light years simpler for you to gain those snap insights from. This is very much when you know better, you do better situation. I still stand by the quality of my Google Analytics related products. For instance, I still love the dashboard bundle for those who choose to continue using the platform, but I just won't be promoting them anymore. And look, I'm also still learning here in this ever-changing digital landscape. In fact, we all are. Things are shifting and changing every day when it comes to digital marketing and tracking and advertising, and we're very much in a time right now where we're building the plane while flying it. So beware of anyone who promises you that they have all the answers figured out in this field. And I'm not doing everything perfectly either, because as Wired magazine stated, Europe's move against Google Analytics is just the beginning. I will link that article in the show notes. But all of these changes and all these enforcements are going to force us to rethink how we want to show up as ethical marketers, which I just refuse to see as a bad thing no matter how inconvenient it seems to our conversion rates right now, because I want us all to market a little more respectfully. But as I learn, I'll be sharing more of my insights and findings on this podcast and on social media. And on next week's episode, we're going to talk about what your better options are for tracking your visitors on your website. But if you want sneak peeks, check out my Instagram over at OMAGrowth, OMGROWTH, or slip over to TikTok. I'm doing those now. And you can find me at OMAGrowth Pod. That's OMGROWTH Pod, because someone swiped my name. Can you believe it? But look, if this is giving you some food for thought, leave me a review saying so, because that's super valuable to me and it's mega appreciated. Also, consider sharing this on social and sharing this content with your biz besties, because this is impacting all of us. And of course, I have a lot more to say and share about all the changes going down in the digital marketing landscape right now and how they're impacting you and your decisions and your options. So if you aren't subscribed, that's a pretty good idea to do as well, because I've got you. I've always got you. You're my favorite. Bye.